first timer, what questions am I not thinking of that I should be asking?
Yeah, what don't you know, right? Okay, thinking back that far, maybe it's easier for you, Cam. When you started out, what didn't you know that you wish you knew starting out?
Everything. All right, so feeding. I already just talked about varroa. Of course, that's a consideration, but many times for new beekeepers, you don't know if you're going to feed too much or feed too little, and really a lot of that comes with experience. A little bit of education does help, but the best education is kind of getting inside the hive, and you don't have to spend a lot of time. I think a lot of people think you get into the hive and you got to go through almost every frame. You have to see the queen. You can spend even just 2 or 3 minutes in there to light puff of smoke, pull a frame or two on the edge. What's the stores of honey? Is there any fresh nectar in there? Bees really depend heavily upon plenty of stores, and the queen lays in proportion to their resources, either incoming or what they have in the hive. So definitely watch the stores inside the hive. That would be one of the things I can think of. I didn't feed enough starting out because I was told nature would supply everything they needed. Huh? You want to elaborate on that, Bob?
Well, that was good. I was stumped, honestly.
Can't think that far back, huh?
Well, it's hard to think, you know.
Well, how about in terms of what advice would you give a newbie? You run into newbies all the time.
Find somebody that knows what they're doing.
How do you know they know what they're doing?
Well, that's tricky too, yeah. You know, you can read all the books in the world, but I like to say that beekeeping is 50% science and 50% art. And Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines art in this sense as the skill that is acquired through experience. I know of an interesting saint over in India that has a really neat saying. He says, wisdom is assimilated with the atoms, not with the eyes. And it's through experience that we learn how to do it. You're just, all I can really say that will be absolutely correct is that you're going to make lots of mistakes, and just don't let it bother you. I always we have a lot of people come into our store, and many of them will lose their bees the first year or just not succeed. And I try to explain to them that, you know, just be tenacious and don't give up. The second year, if you lose your bees that winter, repopulate and do it again. It only takes, and hopefully that won't happen, of course, but if it does, don't give up, because that's part of beekeeping. If you let something as simple as losing your 1 or 2 colonies, if you lose them the first year and you're ready to give up, then you probably never were cut out to be a beekeeper, because it takes more tenacity than that. It really does. You have to stick in there and
Hold back the tears.
Hold back the tears, yeah, and get out the pocketbook and bite the bullet once more. But you know, if you run some bees for the first year, at least you have the equipment under your belt, and hopefully some drawn comb, and it's a lot easier to restart the next year. And within 2, I really think, and you tell me what you think about this, I really think it takes 3 or 4 years to kind of get enough idea of what's going on to where you can really start getting them through the winter properly and doing it right, unless somebody's right there to help you. And you can watch his videos and a few of mine, and that'll help a little bit too.
Watch out for a lot of that stuff on YouTube for sure. Besides Bob and me, none of them know what in the world they're talking about. No, there's actually a handful of pretty good guys on there, for sure. But there also is some stuff that is really, really dangerous on YouTube. So be careful, because usually if it sounds too good to be true, oh, I'm sounding like my dad. Oh, it is. So, but yeah, I'd say about 3 to 4 years. You know, guys like Byron. And I've seen several guys like him, and Byron's a guy that I know, and he's a big Bob fanboy. He used to be a fan of mine until he met Bob, and then, you know, now he doesn't, like, oh, it's Kamon again, whatever. But actually, when we did our conference registration, we have to put down like identity codes for each individual, and Byron's is Bob's biggest fan. And that being said, Byron's only got about 4 years of experience, and he might be in his 5th season now, but he's been grafting queens for a couple years and not being ultra successful every time the first time, but in pushing the envelope. The guy I was talking about earlier that had 20 hives, Dick Brickner, and was really thorough and very competent with those 20 hives. He's the one that kind of helped guide Byron. Byron did a lot of the work. Obviously, a teacher can't get, put the drive in you, but at the same time kind of help guide you down towards better paths. And Byron was already early on. He knew way more about treating mites than I did. He was a much better feeder of bees and just took better care. And Byron's having success, and he was selling a pretty good amount of nukes in his 4th year. And goodness, I don't think I was selling nukes for probably almost 8 years.
Well, he's smart, number one. I mean, my wife cringes when I say this, but there's no such thing as dumb, successful beekeepers. Maybe you'll fumble through for a few years, but eventually it'll catch up with you. It takes a little bit, and I'm no brilliant, and we're not brilliant. We're not, Einsteins, but it takes a little bit of smarts. And then Byron has something else that's very important. He's passionate. If you're not passionate about bees, you're never going to go a long ways. And if you're heading into commercial beekeeping or something like that, you got to have that passion, or it's going to be tough.
For sure.
Byron's going to see this video,
Oh, he's going to see it? Oh my goodness, this is going to go straight to his head. I forgot we were recording.
What's Byron's last name?
Ferris.
What is it?
Byron Ferris. Now, you won't learn anything from him except that Bob is the best thing ever, just so you know.
He asks the right questions. That's what comes eventually. You start asking the right questions. Yeah. That's a big step when you start asking the right questions.
And it's confusing being a new beekeeper because there's just, it's really like anything that you've done. There's a few similarities, but in some things that you think you could kind of tie in a similarity, it actually is the opposite or not even related at all. And what comes to mind when I say that is selling nucleus colonies to beekeepers. People ask you questions, and I'll be like, well, make sure you give them a little bit of feed, and I'll have 2 different types of beekeepers typically when it comes to that. They'll take my nuke, and one of them will stick them in a 10-frame hive, and they'll put 3 gallons of feed on them instantly. And it'll be like in the beginning of May during our prime blackberry flow, or thereabout, and they'll plug up. And then there's some of them that won't feed them anything, and then they won't do any good.
You know what happened to me the very first year? That old gentleman I mentioned earlier gave me all the equipment. I made all the splits, and the bees were flourishing. Everything was going wonderful. It never, ever dawned on me that the honey flow would eventually stop.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I just didn't even think about that. Then suddenly I had to get out the wallet and pay the sugar bill. So I built all them colonies, and by mid-May, the honey flow stopped, and I thought, oh, my.
It really makes a difference. This lady over here has a question, Tom.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we are brand new to this. Like this gentleman, give us what you would go from the very beginning. Like I don't have anything. What do I need?
You'd be good at that.
I mean, I kind of learned like
Yeah.
the box of two. And I get the whole like
Sure.
concept, but then what do you do? Now you've got it all set up. Now what do I do?
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say, Bob, thanks for copying out on that.
Yeah.
And so when you're starting out, there's multiple different ways that you can go about it. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can, but don't get really caught up in you have to have this particular method, because if you watch some of my videos, you'll see I have some hives that are actually going long ways instead of horizontal as typical, or vertical, I should say. I think it's a good idea to get some standard equipment though, because if you need to get more equipment, it's easier to source more. Here in Iowa, you can purchase drawn honey supers, which is really valuable. Combs are a really valuable resource early on, because if there's a good honey flow and there's a lot of nectar coming in, that's something that they can utilize. But to keep the equipment standard is what I would recommend. And I think you have kind of 2 options. You've seen some of the boxes out there that are about that big. Those are your deep boxes. You can use those, and then you can use some thinner, medium, or shallow boxes for honey production. So when you pull that heavy honey off, it's not so rough on your back. But then there's some beekeepers, like Dick Brickner, the one I've been talking about, that's very competent. All he uses is nothing but mediums. And so when he's handling brood frames, whether he's handling anything, it's all mediums, and all the frames are interchangeable. So those are the 2 methods I would recommend. Is you can have intermixing of mediums and deeps, or you could just have one thing of mediums, and maybe if you're concerned about weight, then you could just do that. And the nice thing about that is all the frames are interchangeable. It's kind of like cassette players. You know, just pop it right in and you're good to go. For those of you who don't know what a cassette player is, you're young and spoiled and then probably entitled. They were awesome. Now, Bob, did they have even record players back in your day?
Yeah. I'm gonna surprise you.
You cranked it, yeah.
Not only do I know what 8 tracks are, I know what 4 tracks are because I had one.
They had 4
Most
tracks?
people didn't know that 4 tracks were before 8 tracks, which of course were before cassettes. Had a Muncie Blue Light 4-track in my '56 Chevrolet station wagon.
Gone are the days. At least now you can hear the music.
Another question.
Well, it's not a question, but a suggestion, starting out, find somebody who has bees, spend an hour with them in the
Yeah.
hives.
If not more.
And
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, at least something so you can, what are we looking at?
So
so,
if you got everything set up just perfect like what you just said, how do you introduce the bees? When you put them in, how do you put them in?
so see, this could take, and I wouldn't mind, but it'd take 3 or 4 hours. But what I would suggest, if you'll go to our channel or Bob's channel, we have videos. I have videos where I'm installing packages of bees, and I have videos where I'm installing nukes of bees. And you can see that process. It's really not that complicated, but if you can see it or have someone, like you said, that actually maybe can get involved with you that has experience, it can make the process a whole lot simpler and take some of the headache out of it. And then new bees need to be fed. Now you got to watch it a little bit, and that's again where having a mentor, someone that knows the location, can be very helpful, because here's some of the variables. So if I get a package on the same time period that you all do, I might be starting to get natural nectar come in from our plants. You guys might be freezing your tails off still. And so you're going to have to feed those bees and make sure they have food contact. Bees need that sugar syrup or need honey for energy, to heat the cluster, to keep the brood warm, to fly, I mean everything. Without it, they run out just for a little while and they're done. So you've got, when you install a package or a nuke, if it's not flyable weather and they don't have a lot of resources, it's good to give them a little bit of feed. And you know, it's just a kind of one of those things again where getting some experience from someone, get some hands-on seeing their bees, and that's kind of why we do the videos that we do.
Yeah, you have many more videos than I do on that subject, so I would go to his channel for that. And it's something that's really neat and important is to tie in with a beekeeping organization. It sounds like Iowa's full of them, little local clubs and stuff. That can really, really help. You're in Iowa somewhere? Yeah. I'm guessing that the Iowa State, if they don't, they should. Georgia does. If you go to the Iowa Honey Producers website, surely they're listing all the local clubs.
It's in there.
You should.
It's in there.
You can find them like that.
Thanks.
Where are you from?
Just right here.
You got all kinds of beekeepers around here.
Seba.
Seba.
Dreaming buyers.
Okay.
There you go.
They'll set you up.
Find
One last question. Go ahead.
Double screen boards, if you're trying to help a weaker hive out through the winter, do you have to be concerned with your larger hive not holding that heat down with it going up?
Well, with a double screen hive, the heat is going up through the screens.
But then it's not being held down because your inner cover would be off of that,
Oh yeah, the inner cover would be above the
that on top.
small colony on
Not,
top, yeah.
not on the large colony. I was
Correct, yeah.
wondering-
The only thing between the bottom colony and the small one on top would be just the double screen board. Yeah, they work great for overwintering small colonies over big ones.
And then the large hive would be okay with all that, the air going
Yeah,
up?
if it's a good, healthy colony, they can lose a little heat up through the ceiling there, no problem. It's really interesting, you know, in the winter, especially if they start rearing brood, you can put your hand over that screen. It's literally like a heater coming up through there. You know, once they start rearing brood, they'll maintain 94 or give or take a degree in the brood nest, but even in winter when there's no brood, they maintain 85 at the core. So even in midwinter with no brood, there is some heat coming up out of there. And of course, it can only go so far. I mean, the heat goes up into the next box. It's not like it escapes into space, so it's not like they lose all of their heat and it's gone. You know, it kind of moderates and
Rolls
keeps
back
some
down.
down on the bottom too.
Okay.
It doesn't all escape.
Describe double screen.
somebody else. You might need to describe double screen to somebody.
Yeah, newer beekeepers, it's simply 2 screens with a shim in between. That would be, we both have videos on double screens. He just put one out very recently about overwintering a small colony on a big one. Basically, I use plywood with 2 big holes in it, put a screen on the bottom and the top. You don't want the bees touching each other through the screen because they'll share pheromones and they won't realize that they're separate colonies, you know. So, and then have a separate entrance, like a rim on top where they have a different entrance, possibly or even preferably in a different direction than the colony on the bottom. They work great, and they're very, very underused in this country. I have a few videos talking about different usages of double screens, and I got a comment from a guy in Romania and says, and he's absolutely correct, he says, I don't understand why you Americans don't utilize double screens more. In Romania, everybody uses them. And he's right, we should be utilizing them more. There's so much you can do with them. You can split, I love splitting double deeps that have swarmed with them. Run across a double deep that has swarmed, put a cell and some brood in both halves and slip the double screen board in. You know, we only have a 75 perhaps in a good location, and 80% average of colonies that swarm actually accomplishing becoming requeened and reestablished. With a double screen board, you just doubled the odds. And if they both make it, now you've got another colony. There's so many uses for requeening a colony. Get a nuke established above a double screen, and then when it's ready, you can pull the double screen out after killing the queen below. Just let them go together, instant requeen. They're great for starting nukes in the early spring. Be more important here in Iowa where it's so cold. You can start a nuke over a double screen where it might not have been practical in a nuke box on the ground because it was too cold. The uses go on and on.
And your acceptance rate with the queen is good?
Pardon me?
The acceptance rate with the queen?
It's actually way, way better because when you put a nuke over a double screen board, all the old bees go back home to the bottom box, and all you have left up above is younger nurse bees, and it's the older bees that are less inclined to accept the queen. And at first glance you'd say, well, now I have less bees, how are they going to stay warm? It's the double screen with the heat rising. It's really brilliant. It's a brilliant tool. We all should be using them more. We really should.
The entrance to the double screen is on the opposite side of the bottom?
It can be. When I'm doing it over a single, I like it to be going to the back. On a double deep, it's not, with the 3rd story nuke up above, it's not as important to, I'm okay with the entrance going forward, but on a single, I like it to go the other direction. So
Okay, on that note,
confusion.
we're gonna have to cease this. I realize that there's people that have extra questions. You can feel free to linger and come on up. I don't think Bob and,
I'm not going anywhere.
is going anywhere, and Kamon, you're still good to stick around?
I'm good for another 2 hours. What are you talking about, Tom?
I'm not good for that long.